So dagwan harado sewa gwáyoʼ, Roronhiakewen ni yangech Kanien'kehá Ganyę dodo mo Ganyę to onora niwagit the rodo dana waswega niwadakutanyo. So my name is Roronhiakewen, and I'm also known as Dan Longboat. I'm a professor here at Trent University. I'm the director of the Indigenous Environmental Studies and Sciences program. I'm a Mohawk from Grand River Territory and Turtle Clan. So a real pleasure for me to be here today. So yawanski sewadakarided and sawatsanoni dana gwáyoʼ, and I'm bringing you greetings of health, happiness, and peace. And today I want to talk to you just briefly about some of the context for understanding the exhibit and for helping you to kind of make a connection to history over time, and more importantly, the connection to place that we all have to be concerned about, and our sacred responsibility to care for place. My great teacher was the late Chief Jake Thomas, and the way that I understand what he told me at the time was around this belt here that they refer to as the dish with one spoon. The dish with one spoon, and I'll give you just a real short context for it, was a belt that was put together to help support the peacemaker when he organized the 50 chiefs. We don't know how long ago that was. Some people say it was, shortly after the coming of the Europeans. Some say it was just before the coming of the Europeans. Some people talk about it that it was 1132 AD at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and there's a whole story with that, that talks about an eclipse that happened, within the Syracuse area. And then other people, old people, talk about that it's over 2,000 years old. So we're not too sure how old it is, but needless to say, it's the oldest working form of democracy in the world today. So the context for this is that the chiefs, when the peacemaker came and he put the original 5 nations, Mohawks, Oneidas, Onondagas, Cayugas, and Senecas together as one people. We refer to ourselves then as the Haudenosaunee. Hodi, they, the people plural. Ganusa is the root word, which is house or houseness, and Oni is to build it or to make it, they who build a house. And it refers to the longhouse of one family. So the longhouse of one family then talks directly to the organization of how we get along with one another as family. In the discussion around sharing, of the resources and how we were going to live on the land together, amongst all of the 5 original nations. And then much later in the 1720s, we adopted the Tuscaroras, who were coming up from the Carolinas after their war with the colonists. In the 1720s, they became the Sixth Nation. So people refer to us as the Six Nations. We refer to ourselves as the Haudenosaunee. This belt then was created to be able to illustrate that this dish with one spoon. They talk about that he organized the 50 chiefs all in one circle. He created a dish, a large wooden dish, and inside of it he put a beaver tail soup. He put a spoon in there without any other utensils there to be able to hurt ourselves or to hurt one another. So no knife that was included in that. And he just made that spoon so that the people could feed themselves, and then at the same time keep in mind all the way through the welfare of the other chiefs that were there to make sure that everyone was able to share the dish. So the idea behind it was that, as they went around and they utilized that, he created this opportunity to have the dish that represents the earth, the beaver tail soup inside of it that represents all of the resources that work to sustain and perpetuate life. And then he enabled them in this process to be able to share it in one big circle of chiefs that they were entrusted to be able to have the welfare of others in mind. I oftentimes think about that if the peacemaker was alive today, that he would have, put maybe one empty seat there that would be thinking of the future generations, to ensure that the future generations of all peoples and all life would be able to ensure that we could continue to enjoy the prosperity that the earth has provided for us. So, needless to say, this dish with one spoon then, according to my great friend, the late John Mohawk, John talks about that there was something like 63 or 68 different indigenous nations that assigned to this dish with one spoon. And so this became our opportunity to be able to share with each other, and at the same time to be able to travel amongst one another without fear and without want. And so many times, the people didn't carry big, backpacks or big horses with all kinds of different things on it. They just had simple things that they walked along with, and each village that they went to, they were welcomed because everyone assigned themselves to this dish with one spoon. Time goes on, people live like that for a very long period of time. The relationships between nations was, one of peace, one of friendship, and they helped one another and shared with each other. So that was the nature of how we interacted with the land, recognizing that as indigenous peoples, we all have, or as human beings, we all have a sacred responsibility to care for the places that we live. And so that process then, enabling us to be able to do that, was first put in mind with all of our ceremonies and our ability to share, our ability to give thanks. So we had this unique opportunity to be able to utilize our way of life and at the same time, enact that sacred responsibility to care for the places that we live. Lived like that for a very long period of time. And then once the Europeans came amongst us, we needed to be able to have a relationship about how we're going to live. And so this relationship then, was determined out of this belt. They refer to this as gwáyoʼ, the two-row wampum belt. This gwáyoʼ is a contraction of a larger word, but they talk about the idea that it brightens our minds. And so the idea behind it is that in understanding the relationship, it talks about this river of life and two vessels sailing down the river of life together. They're tied together by principles of peace, friendship, and respect. They talk about that there's a sacred space in between, that they have the responsibility to care for one another and to help each other, but at the same time, to be able to understand that their responsibility is to also care for the river of life, never to interfere with one another, but always to, help each other, and at the same time to care for the places that we live. And so this was first signed by the early Dutch that came into our territory in 1613. And as time progressed over a period of time, if you know your history, then you know that the Dutch and the French had their own issues. So in the 1640s, the Dutch were kind of replaced by the French, their cousins, and the French came into our territory. So in the 1640s, the Dutch accepted this. Time goes on, and again, once you know your history, you'll know that the English and the French, had their disagreements, and then the English came in. The French were dispelled from our territories and our main trading partners, and the English established themselves, or the British established themselves here. So we basically said that, the French, when they came in, they accepted this. And when the British came in, they also accepted this. But then they, through discourse and through much talking, they decided that they wanted to add an amendment to the belt. And so they came up with this belt that refers to the Silver Covenant chain. Sometimes it's referred to as the Friendship Treaty Belt. The idea behind it is that you have an indigenous person on this side and a European person on this side holding up three links of a chain. Some people talk about that as peace, friendship, and respect as well. Other people talk about peace, friendship, and trust. But the idea behind it is that they uphold those links of the chain and their responsibilities to never let go of those principles, that they will always help one another and learn how to live together. So the British sovereign, brought this in, and so according to my great teacher, he talks about that these two belts, always need to go together. One is an amendment to, or an addition to, or an actual illustration, a depiction of the relationship that we have as settlers and as indigenous peoples. It's important to understand, that as we move forward, that throughout history, and the establishment of the United States of America, and celebrating their 250th anniversary this year, and understanding that, that in the 1770s, when they became a nation, they also accepted these belts as well, and the relationship that it determined. Time goes on, and here in Canada in 1867, when Canada was established as a nation, they also accepted these. So you have successive sovereigns within the territories accepting this ancient relationship together and adhering to these principles. So when we talk about that we are all treaty people, it's based on this relationship, but more importantly, understanding that the translation of that is not just between the sovereigns themselves, not just between indigenous nations and the European sovereigns or the neo-European sovereigns. It's really about our responsibility as human beings, that as indigenous peoples and as settler communities of people, we are all treaty people. And so being all treaty people, then we adhere to those principles and understand the necessity of taking care of the places that we live. And so this connection, this sacred responsibility that we have shows up, across time in terms of our relationship, and at the same time, manifests itself in the issues that we see today. So forgetting about these things, has oftentimes caused, the extinctions of species, the loss of biodiversity, the contaminants and pollutants that we see, the overharvesting, the overuse of land, the implications of water, all under and there's many, many more issues that we all know about, all under the umbrella of global climate change, which necessitates then, a complexity in thinking. The complexity in thinking then hopefully provides us with a larger framework for understanding and hopefully creating real innovation to address the problems that we're looking at, the problems that we are as human beings are all being confronted by throughout the world. And so these frameworks then and the articulation of these ideas and concepts, and more particularly the philosophies that come out of that, talk to us about the necessity of changing values. The changing values part really looks at, how do we understand where we live? How do we understand our relationships to ourselves and understanding ourselves and each other? How we understand ourselves as family, as communities, as nations of people, and then how we understand ourselves in connection to the places that we live. So we have a lot of work to do. We have a great opportunity to interface with one another, and the re-establishment of the Cayuga Nation back into the territory, is a fundamental opportunity to be able to understand that these changing values come from and necessitate the engagement of indigenous values. To understand what it means to become indigenous, to understand what it means to take care of the places that we live in and take care of each other, and to fulfill our responsibilities that we were given when we were first made according to our traditions and according to our creation teaching. So just wanted to share, like a brief overview with you on that so that it may help you to provide a proper context and a content for the work ahead. So thank you. Nyawa. Tokinego Daneto.